The key here, why we wanted to do, for those of you guys that are joining, why we wanted to talk about, kind of industry trends together. All of, these are all experts in their respective industries, but of course, everything sort of starts to tie together in the long run. And so you've heard today, like, about this notion of the importance of an open edge, this interchange of information across longer term trust fabrics and just kind of different worlds colliding, but while maintaining privacy and PII and IP protection and all that. This is what it's about, but then of course there's necessarily unique stuff within industries. There's different considerations, but Dilip, I'll turn it over to you and just kind of talk through with the group. Again, really appreciate it, and then I'll pop back in at the end and we'll kind of wrap up. But take it away.
Thanks, Jason. So thanks everyone for joining us, and today we're going to talk about a lot of different industries. So I'm going to do a brief introduction of myself, and then I'm going to hand it off to our panelists so they can do one. My name is Dilip Sarangan, and I run the IoT research program at Frost & Sullivan. Been covering IoT for roughly the last 15 years or so. I started off covering a lot of different technologies, such as video surveillance, building automation, smart homes. Over time, transitioned to the machine-to-machine world. And then about 4 years ago, started up this IoT program at Frost. So thanks everyone for joining us. And I'm going to first hand it off to Maria, so we can hear a little bit about, if you could do a brief introduction of yourself, and we can kick things off.
Absolutely. So thank you for having me. And again, my name is Maria Zorotovich. I'm with Intel. In IoTG specifically, the Director for Strategy and Incubation. And my focus is really about normalizing emerging technology. I get to work out in the greater ecosystem with a number of partners, collaborators, domain experts, brands, retail, to focus in on a particular problem and figure out ways that we can solve it and feed those insights back into the industry, so that we can all move hopefully faster and bring innovation forward. A little bit about myself. I've been in retail for over 20 years. Nordstrom was my last retailer that I was with. And then before I made the move into Intel, I was with a very large cloud provider focusing on retail and consumer goods practice, leading within retail for customers, breaking into the business side, but also within engineering for cloud and AI.
Great. Abuzar, if you'd like to go next.
Sure. So thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure being here and talking to some of the really learned people in the various industries. My name is Abuzar Manager. I lead technology and partnerships for Agora. Agora is a Schlumberger initiative for industrial IoT, and our tagline is very much intelligence at the edge. I've got my t-shirt on in case you guys haven't seen it. So on a lighter note, I have been with Schlumberger for almost 7+ years now. I've been involved with Agora for about close to 1.5 years now. It's been an exciting IoT journey. Having worked very closely, because the whole IoT concept and Agora's tagline being open, secure, and scalable has allowed me to work very closely with, I can say, 2 out of the 3 companies that we have today on the panel. So we work very closely with Intel, and we're actually integrating the OpenVINO platform with Agora, and Rockwell, i.e. also Sensia, working closely with them as on the automation side of things. So this is an exciting area, for the industry today. I've prior to this, I've been involved in setting up the enterprise cloud for Schlumberger IT. Having worked very closely with Microsoft and Google, building an enterprise cloud for Schlumberger, which has been another significant and exciting journey for me. Being a true technologist through and through, Australia is home for me. So bushfires are not uncommon, and it's a long way from home. So thank you for having me on today.
Awesome. Next, let's go to Prithpal.
Hi, Dilip. Thank you very much. So, Prithpal Khajuria, I'm a global segment lead for power sector at Intel. So Intel goal here is to help utilities to drive the innovation in technology, working with them to validate various concepts to accelerate the adoption of technology in the utility sector. One of the area in which I am focused on is the modernization of the grid to handle the large-scale renewable integration, which is happening on both sides, at the rooftop or parking lot solar and versus bigger solar and wind deployments, and how they impact the grid and how can we optimize their use. Before joining Intel 5 years ago, I spent 10 plus years in power industry on both sides, building products for the utilities and working with the utilities. Look forward to our discussion here today.
And last but not least, Nitya.
Hey, thanks. Thanks, Dilip. Good afternoon, everybody. Hey, thanks for this opportunity to meet with you guys and share some thoughts about the manufacturing space. So I'm Nitya Kumar Parameswaran, and I'm the Enterprise Analytics Leader for Rockwell Automation. So my team comprises of product managers and product marketing managers, and our core focus is on the analytics portfolio for Rockwell. So our products span from analytics closer to the edge, like near the controllers, to having a data science platform where leveraging like technologies from the cloud, at the same time other data that's coming from not only just from the control systems and automation systems, but also from ERP systems, and then having a broad sort of capabilities that addresses different user personas, whether it's a process engineer, the control engineer, or citizen data scientist, or true technical data scientist. So it's a gamut of products, each for a different use case and addressing a different target segment. Nice to see you guys. I'm fairly new, but 7 to 8 months now. Prior to that, I was with GE Digital, and before that, I was with IBM. And IBM bought enterprise asset management solution called Maximo. So I have a mix of both industrial experience as well as software. Nice to see you guys.
Great. All right, let's get this kicked off. So let's start with the topic that is kind of, I wouldn't say top of mind as much as it's impacting all of our lives today, which is why we're doing this conference virtually, and every one of us is in some part of our homes. So one of the things from COVID-19, the main thing that's come out is obviously people have to change the way they do business, the way their employees go to work, as well as the kind of infrastructure, the different things that they need to ensure that business continues to run smoothly. So I'm going to start first with Nitya, because manufacturing has been an industry where the COVID-19 has had a massive impact. So what are you hearing from manufacturers as well as seeing in your experience that what are the different things that people are looking to change or do differently in terms of using edge and IoT and these different technologies that are available today?
Sure, Dilip. So yeah, with the recent COVID, right? It is so it's a different kind of crisis that the manufacturing industry is now facing, right? The crisis, like traditionally the workforce used to be in a shop floor, in a closed environment and operating these machines. So it's a different mode of operation now. How do we get? It is still essential for some of these machines to run with human intervention, right? So again, so that is something big that they are trying to manage now, and it's. The second thing is also like the supply chain, which is a big aspect to manufacturing. How does raw materials come in? How do I keep up with the demand? So there is a lot of, initially, there was a big concern in the manufacturing space. How is my supply chain going to be affected? Because as the raw materials come in, what is going to be the effect of COVID and the transportation sector being affected? And the third is like, okay, how do I react to the business changes, right? Okay, I've been producing some products so far, but my demand is totally changing now. It's different products that is every customer is focused on. So which means that how flexible is my production? How can I quickly switch over to maybe something that I have not done before, or something which I have a limited line, but I should be able to maybe shut some lines and then move to a different line to manufacture a new product. So it's been a very interesting journey. But what we are also seeing in terms of, it's much more an appreciation for leveraging some of the analytic technologies and not being like very, let's say, distant from cloud technologies too, right? So I think people are now getting to understand better how cloud can actually provide value in terms of even getting people together and still can collaborate. The second thing is it also opens your mind, like not necessarily everything has to be within the four walls, right? There are technologies available outside that can be leveraged without giving out like your data in a certain format, right? Like there are ways in which you can still keep the data secure, but still leverage some of these technologies that are available for you to adopt. Because at the end of the day, it is all about how quickly can I react to market around us, whether it's people, whether it is the supply chain, whether it is the demand. So how quickly can I adapt? This is what we are seeing now. And so we are having more and more open conversations with customers and not shy in kind of talking about, hey, we have a broad portfolio of analytical products. Some are closer to the edge, some are closer to the cloud. And all are fine. There's no one answer. You need to take different approaches based on the use cases that you want to tackle.
That makes sense. So, all right, Maria, same thing. And I know you cover a lot of different segments within retail. So maybe pick a couple of them. Tell us about what are some of the things that you're seeing, or some of the changes that seem to be happening in terms of the mindset and how people are reacting to the situation.
Yeah, absolutely. So to your point, retail is pretty diverse when you look at it. It's vertical and the sub-verticals. You have retail, you have big box, you have tree, and they're all dealing, and that's all stems for the consumer's behavior. So if we look at what's consumers' top of mind, just kind of holistically across, we're dealing with issues of unemployment, consumer confidence, store closures, stay at home, health and safety topics that are starting to impact the consumer and where they want to spend. I think it was a McKinsey report that said 75% of consumers have now tried either a new brand, a new place to shop, or a new method to shop during this pandemic. So consumers are reacting to that. And we're seeing that in the shift in category spend. So in some places where we're seeing double-digit growth, those essential categories like food and bev, general merchandising, starting to taper down into your health, also building and garden materials since we're at home. And then non-essentials are feeling the pain in which the consumer is not spending, your clothing, your accessories, auto, in dining services, sporting, department stores. We're seeing that shift, and how that translates over to retail in general. I think talking to retailers, to grocery, etc., there's some major things that are coming across. Business continuity, running my business, that agility portion, managing my costs within my business, resiliency in terms of acceleration, operation, scale. We have investments. Where am I going to reinvest or focus new investments now? And then where do they see their future self? So if we're going to be dealing with some of these shifts and some of these changes in how we have to operate, where is the future self of that brand and how they may have to change either their business or their service model? And so that is definitely starting to trickle down. I would say if you had to encapsulate in two themes, it is conversation around agility, conversation around resiliency. And that's where, you may get into the nuance of the business or service model, which then goes down to the use case and the capabilities and the nuance of that particular, slice of vertical. But at the end of the day, when we talk about any group that is consumer facing or customer centric, they're going to want the agility, the flexibility, the scale to serve that customer in any way that they want, right? And we know the consumer's point of view is going to shift. It's an ever-changing change of expectations. And we've seen that the pandemic with consumers change, I think it was mentioned earlier that businesses like grocery have realized that they actually can make some of those changes. So in talking to some leaders who have said, hey, we had on the roadmap 2 years out being able to do curbside, they were able to turn that around within months because there was a need for the consumer and a need to do that. And if you look at the base of all of that, it comes into the infrastructure around the edge to cloud, and the businesses that have set them out for success and they have made investments in that space have been able to accelerate at tremendous speed. And we're seeing that. Those are the names that we're seeing in the headlines, in the papers, that are able to serve, that have come out with really great quarters. And so now we're starting to see a lot of businesses who thought they couldn't do it, wasn't going to make the investment. We're now seeing real proof points from other retailers, from other quick serve restaurant, from grocery, that say actually you can, and here's the value and the benefit of doing it.
Makes sense. All right, let's go talk a little bit on the other side of this equation. So oil and gas. I think you mentioned this to us a little earlier, that COVID-19 isn't the start of a recession in oil and gas, but it's been an industry that's been kind of trying to make changes for a while. So tell us about, what changes are actually happening in that industry, or what are they doing from a digitalization standpoint, edge computing standpoint, and how has COVID-19 either accelerated or decelerated the momentum there?
We cannot.
You're on mute.
I think you're on mute. We can't hear you.
My apologies. That would help, turning the mute off. So I was saying a lot of what I have heard so far, I resonate with that. And, I think there is a lot of cross-pollination across the organizations, especially COVID being the common accelerator. However, taking a step back, in oil and gas industry, for anyone who's been following, the stock market, or if you've been looking at the way the oil and gas industry has been trending, especially since you'd say early 2014, it's been consistently moving south, right? And so what has happened is organizations, larger organizations and smaller organizations, right, for a variety of reasons, and some being as simple as to continue existing, have to find ways of doing things differently, right? There is a Gartner study, which talks about, by 2023, roughly 2025, the expectation is that more than 30% of your industries, enterprises, will have some sort of on-premise deployment of IIoT platforms. Now, this is a big statement, when we talk about, IIoT platforms, especially if we look at it and I'll sort of connect the dots, but if we look at it in our day-to-day life today, I feel IoT has become such an integral part of our everyday offering that, knowingly or unknowingly, we are sort of sucked into it. Now, the point is, how do you take that and you industrialize it? The other day I walked home and I see my son sitting next to the Google Mini at home doing his maths homework. And he asks Google, how much is 37 divided by 4? And I'm like, what's happening? And I suddenly realized that the way children are studying has changed because IoT has become such an integral part of our life. Now, studies obviously show that, but in terms of the oil and gas and accelerated, Dilip, to your point, by COVID, I will talk about certain areas. Like, for example, one area where the focus has been more is about effective remote operations, right? And when we talk about remote operations, the first thing that we want to talk about is not only being efficient in that space, but also being effective and continuous. The ability to bring intelligence and control to the edge is no more a luxury. It has become a necessity because I have increased cost. I have reduced skill labor. I need to find ways to increase my profit margins only to be able to sustain, only to exist. So when you look at that and you say, okay, effective remote operation seems like, a bit of a jargon. But then you look at it and say, well, there are edge devices, there are leaf devices, and I need that. For me to be able to manage that, I need to have the ability to bring intelligence and control with some level of automation at the edge. Okay, if I have to do that, then I need to be able to standardize or automate processes. I need to be able to create advisory alerts, alarm mechanisms. For that to happen, I need to have data insights. Well, for data insights, the core thing is I need to be able to have data. And Maria, I'm sure, in the retail industries, you'll be able to relate this that, especially with the likes of Google, the amount of analytics that you can do with the data that is available is tremendous. And the decisions that you can make based on those are tremendous. So if I need to do data insights, I need to have structured data, data that is aggregated and more importantly, accessible. This sort of then says I need to have certain efficiencies around my governance. I need to democratize my data science. I need to build and share customer intelligence. I need to have a hybrid, more flexible and open architecture. And when you put all of this together, it spells, an IoT platform. It smells like an IoT platform, right? I need to be able to connect my brownfield and greenfield devices. I need to be able to bring that data in where I can then create efficiencies across a variety of business areas, whether it is operations, whether it is logistics, whether it is finance, be it. So this is one of the areas where oil and gas has significantly started to look at how, and accelerated by COVID, how are they going to bring a true, digitalization and transformation in the oil and gas industries?
Okay. So, well, now we've talked about oil and gas. So let's move a little further away from, let's move a little closer to the consumer with utilities. And Pritpal, something related to what's going on in the utility space.
So transformation already started in the utility industry with the integration of renewables. As renewables start coming more on the, what I call it, on the south side of the grid, okay, the rooftop and parking lots. And so that was kind of one side of it. And then the big, large scale distribution coming at wind farms and solar farms. So that started happening like 10 plus years ago, and which started drastically changing how the utilities will run their operations going forward. And there was a rethinking in it. And that's where Intel also saw that, okay, there's another factor coming to it. Our demand for electricity is going to go up as our infrastructure is going to get, our transportation infrastructure is going to get electrified. That's the one side of it. Then the digital commerce, which was basically growing up, and our data centers are going to go up. And on the top of it, we are mandating everybody to use more and more renewable resources worldwide. The countries and states and cities have those mandates. So that was kind of one area that transformation was happening on. Second thing, now COVID came, and which drive the need for more transformation, because what's happening, most of the utility assets are outside. Okay? And so now how do you get inside into it, manage, maintain, and operate? So I think that changed the thinking, and I think it will accelerate the adoption of technology into the utility sector. But if I step back like 10 plus years ago, when utilities started the smart metering, that was the first large-scale IoT deployment in the world. If we say 80% of the smart meters, I think we have around 160 million smart meters in US, homes and businesses. I think 80% of them are smart, which have two-way communication. You can upgrade their operating system, application software, and all configuration and provisioning. So the basic utilities have been kind of the forefront of the technology. And what Intel wants to work with them to keep that momentum going forward. In that process, what we see is that the next wave will be in the substation market, where substations need to be become like a micro data center. How can we leverage the data-centric technologies to build this system at the edge? We call it a micro data center at the edge. All the information is aggregated, normalized, and then use the power of analytics to get deeper insight into it. And then if you start applying that to different applications, the predictive maintenance to get a better insight into the health of the assets which are sitting in the substation are down from there towards the consumers. That's the one aspect of it. Also start getting into the behavior of the consumer at the edge. See that, okay, how much renewable is coming, how much electric cars are there, consuming energy, storage is there, and start aggregating all that information and start putting that into a broader context from the market needs perspective, from the grid reliability perspective. And so I think, we put on the top of it that in this new scenario when COVID, we got people working from the home. We have summer heat in California. It is basically stressing all our infrastructure, and we don't have a luxury of rolling trucks and sending people everywhere. So that we build this next generation infrastructure, which is flexible, secure, remotely manageable, and easy to deploy new applications with those rolling trucks. So I think that's the need of the future, and it's there to help utilities to deploy these new technologies.
So let's jump into a little bit of the horizontal versus vertical conversation, just because I think, a lot of IoT or a lot of the different solutions for IoT and use cases for IoT, they do transfer across verticals and industries. They may not necessarily, there might be some regulations that they might need to be tweaked for, or a little bit of a small bit of differentiation. However, when it comes to stuff like asset monitoring, or even asset tracking, loss prevention, all of those types of applications and use cases, they definitely there is a lot in common between different industries. So if I am, let's say, an end customer who's thinking about deploying IoT and edge solutions, where should I start? What should I be thinking about in terms of what's different in different industries, but also what types of infrastructure and other things can be leveraged that may not be very vertical centric? So I'm going to start with Nithya on the manufacturing side on this one, and then move forward.
Sure, Dilip. I think the key thing, so far, I think the manufacturing space has been, I would say, kind of exposed to a lot of the technologies that are available today, right? And so the challenge now is, how do I start? Where do I start? Because I have assets that are 20 years old in my shop floor that is still producing my product. And then I also have assets that have come later with more sophistication, and they are just 5 years old. So it's there in minds of every manufacturer. Where do I start here? Because I have these disparate systems in my place. The data coming from these systems are not structured, they are coming in different formats. Now, for me, the biggest challenge is getting these data together and then looking at, hey, what can I do with this data? So now slowly, if you look at the manufacturing space, a lot of people have been trying a POC with the technologies and seeing some initial results. Some of them have just stopped at the POC level because maybe the expectation was too high with the POC, and then they kind of got a little bit lost in terms of what they saw. But now there's a big change now that's happening. People are looking at, hey, we need to more look at, it's a good marriage between the technology that is available and the domain expertise that it's resident within the company, right, with every manufacturer. Because these operators have been using this machine for the last 10 years, 15 years. So they know how these machines work. But if you're trying to solve a problem just from a technology perspective, then you're not getting the input from the operator who's been using this machine for a long time. He has seen some of the uniqueness about the machine that the data may not show, right? So it's more and more now, it's a more collaboration between the data scientists who are using the technology and the process and the control engineers coming together. Now, again, we're also looking at how this technology, when we bring in analytics, when we bring in some of these tools and techniques, it should not always be towards the IT section of the manufacturer, also to the OT people. Can I prepackage some of these, right? If I say like anomaly detection is one of the use cases that I constantly see. Now, should I go back to this data scientist, or can I prepackage for a particular use case and give it to the control engineers or the process engineers? And it's kind of like a data scientist in a box, right? They don't know the data science behind it. They don't know the models behind it, but they know like this application is for, let's say, anomaly detection. Now they can say like, hey, these are the variables I think is affecting my end output or the quality of the product. And that is there in the minds of the process engineer or the controls engineer. So they can actually test the model. Like they can say, okay, I think these are the different variables I think contribute to the quality of the end product. Now the model can train based on, let's say, historical information and come back and say like, hey, I'm with like 80% confidence I can actually predict quality or detect or an anomaly that I'm going to see in my product output. Now the whole, you're totally changed the dynamics here. You're giving it to the process engineer, the controls engineer, and he or she has now more power to kind of influence how the model is being trained. And once they are successful, like they can just deploy it. So we are seeing that trend now more and more often, like we're leveraging the IT technologies in the OT space is a marriage between the two. And also like looking at the use cases, like what am I trying to do? So there's no one solution. It's not always edge. It's not always cloud. Like there is a place for each of those depending on the use case that I'm trying to drive. But I'm trying to look at like I want to take immediate action, almost real-time action, then I'm close to the edge. Edge computing makes total sense. But if I want to do a strategic initiative, how am I going to improve my process, like across different plants? Am I seeing asset utilization? How am I going to set a benchmark and then try to influence other plants to come up to that particular benchmark? Then there's a much more a strategic initiative where you need to look at data from across plants at a much more enterprise level. So we are seeing that shift now, like where products that are being offered is more towards not only just to the data scientists for leveraging the technology, but also to the hands of the process, the controls engineers. And one of the key things I'll stop here is how do I make it easy? Like how do I automate the connection between the OT and the IT layer? Okay, and again, there are certain products coming out. Like can I make some of the contextualization, some of the aggregation right at the source rather than in the database, right? So there are some of the trends are coming there where I want to provide ready-made data to the data scientists to do analysis and not spend a lot of time in data engineering, which is almost 70 to 80% of the time before you actually try to solve a problem. Makes sense?
Pritpal, how about on the utilities and energy side? What do you feel like there might be some horizontalized solutions that are available, but also some of the specific versions?
Exactly. So I think initially the utility IoT started with connectivity. Okay, so I can connect that to kind of a, but it has gone further behind than now. No, it is all about basically first collecting the data at the edge, normalizing the data, and extracting the intelligence out of it. And I can give you one example. We started working in Intel. We partnered with two leading utilities here in US. And say one of the problems they saw that protection and control, which is very critical for the safety of the grid. And they say, okay, currently what we are doing is that we are buying these boxes, individual boxes from 5 different vendors. And we have multiple regions of hardware, multiple regions of the firmware. One utility says I have 250 versions of hardware and 200 versions of different firmware. There's no way I can manage it. How can I move forward? So we work with them to build a reference architecture and how this new world is going to look like, and using the virtualization technologies, the rugged hardware, and then using the virtualization technology. Then we got the ecosystem together, which bring all the domain-specific knowledge, bring and start putting this whole solution together. So it is a combination of IT and OT technology. You see that horizontal platform, which is coming from the IT-centric technologies, the data-centric technologies, the virtualization coming there, and then a lot of analytics capabilities coming from that side. Okay? And then we start putting on the top of it these OT-centric applications and simplify all the operations for the utilities. So I think that's where this basically merger of the horizontal technologies with domain-specific technologies, and there's no need for everybody to go and basically that platform from ground up. In old days, we used to build the hardware, the firmware, the operating system. There's no need to do that. There's a standard hardware available. There's a standard virtualization platform available, and let the domains expert companies come and deliver those specific related application analytics and drive the value for the customer. What it does, it accelerates basically time to market. It will accelerate the innovation. It will reduce the cost and also accelerate the adoption of new technology in the marketplace and create the win-win situation for everybody.
Okay. Abuzar, let's hear a little bit from you on the oil and gas side. I know you mentioned edge computing a little earlier, so I want to see how much importance now people are placing on the edge in the oil and gas space than they were previous years.
So Dilip, this touches this touches the core, the heart, right? This is very close to my heart, and the one thing that I would like to start off with is the coining of the Internet of Eyes, right? Like we have Internet of Things. I think one technology that is and will become a horizontal across the board, both at the edge as well as in the cloud, is the ability to use cameras and visual technologies, including voice, sound, etc., but more so the ability to see things. Right now, I'll share an example of what we are doing within oil and gas, and how with COVID and with the ability to manage HSE better, the ability to use camera technologies. And this is basically something that has been going on from the time when they called it the CCTVs, right? And still the CCTVs, where it was used primarily for a visual monitoring purposes. But now taking that technology and talking about how that horizontal also becomes a unique vertical for oil and gas, and what it allows us to do at the Internet of Things and at the edge. So what are we doing today? In the oil and gas, I'll take an example of flare monitoring, right? Now, flare is quite a large business for it across oil and gas. Anyone who knows will know that flare monitoring has always been significantly important. But what people have not been able to do with time is use technologies like IR cameras to also detect methane leak. Now, you see how flare monitoring, detecting your methane gas leak using a flare camera that allows you to do that, and tying that to your whole sustainability objective, right, and your greenhouse gas emission, right, it becomes quite a large business for the oil and gas offerings. And with Agora, what we are doing is building that solution. We are partnering with solution providers that are building cameras that have the capability to do both visual detection as well as sniffing. So you have sensors that are connected to the cameras that are giving you the capability to visualize and sense, and be able to provide the ability to do your greenhouse gas detection, your flare monitoring, and your meeting your sustainability objectives all in one. And all of this can be done without having to send people over, or being able to retrospectively correct leak detections that have been identified at a later stage. So you see that there is not only a dollar value associated with it, but there is a significant moral value, that is associated with the whole sustainability objective of the organization. Now let's take this a step forward, and we say that you are using cameras because today the technology is allowing you with something as basic as your pan, tilt, and zoom cameras, which are called as your PTZ cameras, right? So at some point in time, I'm using that camera to detect my flare, but because the camera have the capability to pan, tilt, and zoom, I can use the same camera to also monitor some analog gauges that are out there and convert that analog information into digital. And we are doing this with some offshore rigs where otherwise I have to send a chopper because these are unmanned rigs, to be able to go read those gauges and come back and record those readings. Now, just using the Internet of Eyes and being able to monitor my flare, monitor my analog gauges, monitor my methane detections at the same time, I'm being able to cover a significantly large use case for oil and gas. Now, is this something that is specific to oil and gas? Yes. When you say flare, yes. When you say methane detection, yes. But when you're talking about analog readings, right? Can that be transferred across other utility industries? I guess so. You take that and you say, now I'm bringing the same use case and I'm doing HSE monitoring. So you create, and again, being specific to oil and gas, you have a rig floor situation where floor for HSE safety, where you're doing compliance, where you're looking at PPE. So if you think about it, right, taking a simple ability to do a visual detection, you can take images and you can take videos and you apply some timely data aggregation and you apply analytics, bringing all of this data, in a timely manner at a central location. I'm being able to provide different business areas the value coming out of the insights that I'm driving out of that data, right? And all of this is connecting to the ability to make cameras, right? The new sensors for oil and gas and IoT.
Great.
Thank you, Dilip. I'd like to add one thing. So just the same technologies in the utility industry. So we have arc detection in a lot of assets, basically, and also things are heating up. So you can use the same image technology to understand, green, yellow, and red. When acid is heating up, means this acid is being compromised. So that data can be captured and sent back to the control center. So people have no eyes on it. It's just not they're dependent on the instrument reading, but there is a physical reading through the camera, so they can superimpose on each other, get a better insight into the health of the asset.
I think that's a very valid point, Prithpal. And what we have noticed is that when you start to develop, and the reason why I'm saying this is because we're working very closely with Intel and integrating the OpenVINO stack of applications, right? Now, that is something that was not designed primarily for oil and gas, but things like interactive phase detection, object detection, and which also aligns with, in our parking spots, in our parking garages, we are able to do that for vehicle number plate detection, right? Human safety, where you're talking about, things like posture, fatigue detection, etc., etc. These are solutions that have been developed using, your sensing through visual technology, but they can be cross implemented across a variety of horizontal industries.
It's funny you mentioned those technologies because some of those I know are pretty big on the retail side. So, Arya, maybe you could talk about some of the things that some of the retailers might be implementing that obviously they do cut across different industries, but also it's really essential for their business today.
Yeah, so, at Intel, a few years back, we started to take a look at what does retail really need? Even with the diversity of the verticals and the sub-verticals, at the end of the day, what do they need and what do they want to share with us? So we actually went out on a listening tour to talk to as many retailers and retail tech providers within this space. And we realized that the majority of themes that were coming across, again, was around flexibility, was scalability, was interoperability, and that I'm a customer-centric organization and I need to be able to bring in new experiences, which may require new form factors or hardware and different applications. within my retail environment as quickly as possible to serve the need. And so, our view was to meet that need and start that conversation within the community. It was about the Open Retail Initiative, which we kicked off last year. We have a partnership with many folks that are participating here and across the ecosystem. And the intention there is really about a common open framework that enables an ecosystem of interchangeable components and accessible data. And what that distills down to is when we look at the different areas that have these applications that require data, that require the insights, that require processing at the edge, but then also have that component of being cloud forward and looking at new architectures for speed. The areas that we see, of course, and I think you have already mentioned, Dilip, is around inventory. So the things that are coming now are around micro allocation, localized service, demand forecast for surges based on pandemic and being able to scale up and down based on either policy that's happening within local area and need. We're seeing omni-channel commerce continuing to be in terms of last mile fulfillment, delivery, curbside, distributed order management, contactless pay. All of those types of applications, they actually will serve the customer better as you start to share some of the data components within them to actually help the artificial intelligence that may be helping to power the engine behind either the recommendations or the service that would be provided to that end customer. Supply chain, of course, I think some of those pieces were mentioned, especially on the manufacturing side. For retail specifically, what we're going to be dealing with in the pandemic is not only the fulfillment disposition, but also the reverse logistics. So now that I must do everything that's online, all those things are going to come back with returns. How do I handle that reverse logistics and optimize for the dispositioning of those objects that need to go back into my inventory, but that I need to sell as quickly as possible because it's aging inventory and I'll be headed towards a markdown. Workforce, productivity, collaboration, labor scheduling, being able to go ebb and flow, actually a localized scheduling that allows me to actually move resources amongst my locations versus within my four walls. And then lastly that I mentioned, a resounding conversation around the infrastructure to do that. So if I want speed to deliver all those different types of use cases and have those data points available, the infrastructure and modernizing at the edge, creating a platform of accessibility. And so where we've entered into that conversation again is around working with the ecosystem, working with EdgeX Foundry, looking at that open source and that middleware in which data can be easily much more exchanged freely. And we think that is the probably most realistic step forward towards a modern architecture of cloud and edge when you start to look at the need for service-oriented architecture, containers, moving in that direction. Because the reality for retail, we're not going to be able to tear down everything they have and just completely put something up new. We have to step into it and put investment over time. And we have found based on feedback that is probably the easiest way to step into certain applications in certain areas as you bring certain applications to the edge and look at containerizing those pieces. And like I mentioned, we are seeing names in the headlines of retailers who had great last quarters who have done that and have done that at scale and can push out new feature sets really within moments, within all areas of their stores or all locations across the country that can tee up and bring them down. And so that's where we're seeing retail go, and that's where there's such great opportunity for all of us within the ecosystem.
Awesome. Thanks, Maria. And also I want to thank every one of you, Abuzar, Pritpal, Nitya. Thank you guys so much for sharing your insights and talking about how things are kind of changing and evolving in each of the industries that you guys serve. I'm going to hand it back to Jason to closing comments and wrap up. You're on mute, Jason.
Lost Jason.
No, I think he's just trying to get back in. But that was fun. And oh, there you go.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. Hey guys. What would a virtual event be without some technical difficulty at the very end? So
It's
yeah,
good at the end though.
I really appreciate you guys joining on me, all your expertise throughout the day. It's been a great day. I mean, I think this makes it clear the power of the network effect. That we've talked a lot today. We've heard the term "it takes a village." All of you guys make great points, across the board, and just really appreciate everybody joining. Marie, you mentioned EdgeX Foundry. I don't know if everybody knows, but that's a project that started with me and a couple people at Dell like 5 years ago. We're like, what if we tried this? And I'll say initially we looked at what's the right architecture, and a lot of the principles we're talking about, deploy cloud native principles everywhere you can while recognizing inherent trade-offs. Kind of these open APIs and whatnot. But initially we thought it was going to be like an internal platform, but then we realized, maybe this needs to be open. What if the internet wasn't open? And so we started developing that, and it's picked up steam, across the ways. Bill said he remembers the second meeting. Yeah. And so just so many great people piled in, and that's another great example of the network effect. I mean, it from when we started it, blank sheet of paper, 2015, it just hit 6 million downloads. And so again, that's the power of the network effect. There's a lot of other cool stuff happening on LF Edge. There's a lot of other cool stuff happening elsewhere. It's not about any one thing. It's about just collaborating and then focusing on value in the long run. And so, what we want to do, is work with really smart people like yourselves. Help people, customers solve problems, bring together best in class, provide choice. If a customer has no opinion and needs the right choice, we'll advise on what we think is the right choice. That's why we have the entourage of partners. But and then we get to the ultimate goal, which is more and more interconnected ecosystems over time. And for that, you also need an open model. I mean, I can think of a few retailers that would love to cross over into the home, or insurance, utilities, energy. Everything's interconnected in the end. But it'll take time. Let's start small, and think about it. But you've got to architect right today to get to the real potential in the future, and it's going to involve some degree of open. So again, I really appreciate it. Any last words? Otherwise, we'll close it down. One last thing I'll say, if you want, I know this has been a long day, but if you want, you can head over to the networking section. You hit the networking tab on the left. It's kind of like the speed dating. You'll get kind of randomly assigned to somebody. I've met some really good people through it. In fact, Jags with Latent AI, we always keep running into each other on the hop and networking, because I guess we're both really into it. But then we're like, I know you, so we pass along. But try it out if you want. But otherwise, it's been awesome. I really, really appreciate everything. Everyone throughout the day has been so great. So we're gracious that you guys joined us and lended your expertise. So